Yeah, well, this is awesome. It's so great to be able to chat with folks. You know, Keenan is incredible, and looking forward to hearing more about your thoughts.
Thanks. And I'm super looking forward to hearing your thoughts too. I mean, on the tech side, you're pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie.
So Ian R asks, Bowness High School. Yeah, 2006. So Ian's a whippersnapper. I graduated in '95 from Bowness High School. This is my dad found this at a Goodwill or something like that and got it to me a couple of years ago. Spent time in Bowness, broke some bones in the wrestling, got a couple concussions in rugby, so it was a good time.
Anytime you break a bone, that's always a good time.
Yeah. I broke my collarbone, and those are really annoying because you can't put a cast on them. Oh. And so there was a butterfly thing holding my arms back for like a month, and it was not a good time.
I feel you. I actually broke my arm in September. Oh. I just took the cast off last week, and it was really cool because I got a 3D printed cast.
Oh, yeah?
Which was amazing. And you can remove it, which was probably a terrible idea because I kept taking it off to do things, and then I'd be like, ah! But a cast is just so annoying. I mean, you can't do anything good with it. My typing was useless. I had to learn how to do, speech to text for everyone.
Oh, really? Did you have to deal with like much weakening of the muscles and stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Surprisingly, so the break was the radius right at the wrist, and then part of the wrist broke. So just being able to like move my fingers is a new thing.
Really? Wow. Yeah. Well, maybe you learn Dvorak on one hand and QWERTY on the other.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Cool. So Brody's asking. Love to hear the thoughts on the future of Azure Defender for IoT and Azure Defender in general. Some thoughts. One of the things that I think is really interesting is, and actually before we go on, maybe if we could introduce ourselves a little bit so that folks have ideas of what is kind of game for questions. Keenan, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Keenan Skelly. I'm a CEO of a company called Shifted, and we do gamified cybersecurity awareness. It's super cool. My background is a little bit varied, and my pathway to cybersecurity was a bit strange. I think maybe probably like most people. I started life out diffusing bombs in the United States Army, and I moved on to run the comprehensive review program at DHS, doing vulnerability assessments on critical infrastructure. And then I fell into the evil world of the private sector and startups, which I absolutely loved. And I became kind of the go-to person when it comes to cybersecurity ranges, training ranges, doing the red team, the blue team, the white cell, all of the fun stuff in the background, and really helping people learn cybersecurity with some really great fun tools like gamification, like artificial intelligence, et cetera. So that's my short run.
Cool. And I'm Lee Holmes. I'm work at Microsoft. I'm an Azure Security Architect inside of Azure Security. And I live in Seattle, Washington. I spent a bunch of my time as a developer on the PowerShell team. And I wrote the PowerShell cookbook and the Pocket Reference and things like that. And in the last while, I've been, as I mentioned, doing security architecture for Azure Security. And so, as we have different teams and different products working on different things, that's where we work on, helping make sure that they're secure through processes and systems and kind of design reviews and things like that. So I'm always trying to keep ahead of the attackers and do as much as we can for the defenders as possible. Okay, so Brody's question, thoughts on Azure Defender for IoT and Azure Defender in general. So I think, one of the things that I'm really just starting to see in the last, probably 5 years is, if you went to any security conference before 5 years ago, 98% of the presentations, they were still on-premises things. And we started to see some transition of folks, being less just generally afraid of the cloud. When I think about the cloud, when you think about it as an actual thing that you're going to go do, you can feel a lot of fear about it. One of the things that's, we've been doing as professionals, we've been doing our taxes online forever. We've been banking online forever. And I think thinking about the cloud as different than just, working online is a kind of a dangerous way to think about it. And one of the things what I do love about working in Azure and being a big part of how we can secure the cloud is that I get a chance from a first row to get a chance to see the amount of security engineering that goes into our cloud infrastructure, the design of the software being deployed to the cloud and the applications that we're writing. And so I know, and I've experienced other companies and get a chance to see their security maturity and always how strained everybody is for resources. This is one of those things when we talk about the cloud where we're able to apply, Microsoft and Azure is a multi-billion-dollar business. The fraction of the money that we spend on securing Azure and securing Microsoft is just so much further than folks would be able to spend on their own otherwise. And so I'm really, really optimistic about the increase in security that people can get by moving to the cloud. Now, a bunch of this does come from when you start to host your infrastructure in Azure or AWS. A big part of that is becoming aware of a lot of the stuff is just handled for you. You don't have to worry about, the servers hosting these applications getting compromised. That is a very legitimate worry when you're hosting things on premises. When they're being hosted in Azure, you don't have to worry about those being compromised. You don't have to worry about your data centers going down. You don't have to worry about the operators going in and being bribed to, steal hard drives and things like that. So immediately your base level of security raises. When you do start to host things online, then there are still some things when it comes to the way that you interact with your subscriptions, with your services, with your web apps and things like that. And all of these do have an amazing data stream within Azure. So Azure Monitor is a great place to look at. I'll touch on that a little bit in the talk later on today. Now, when you start to talk through Azure Defender, for IoT is specifically for IoT device, but for Azure Defender all up, previously known as Azure Security Center, this is a place where we have a whole team that is aware of, here are the big risks when you're hosting things in the cloud. And they can do things like the security score as part of that to help you figure out, hey, I'm not even aware that there is a lockdown that I can do here, but instead start to alert you for these things, and they can become your focuses for additionally improving your security. So I'm a really big fan of being able to operationalize some of the security best practices, and Azure Defender is a great way to go about that. Skelly equals organizer.
Oh yeah, I'm on here as the B-Sides Calgary organizer, not as Skelly.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. I didn't realize. Oh, you're using the account.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
I see. I'm like, so you also, in addition to keynoting, organized the whole thing.
No, definitely not. I had no hand in that whatsoever. But yeah, we had some IT issues, of course.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I really, and I'm going to jump into what you were talking about in terms of, Microsoft and securing the cloud. In a past position, I had the great opportunity of working with some of the folks at Microsoft to create sort of trainings on how to use all of those features, right? How to actually get into your account and set everything up, whether it's from the Sentinel side or from the Azure side. And I have to say that the feedback that we got from the users and being able to do that setup and really do it with ease and not have to spend too much time diving into it is really impressive. So kudos.
The gamification stuff that you've been working on, what are your thoughts around like gamification of application security or kind of infrastructure security?
Absolutely. I think when we start talking about how to get people more intrinsically comfortable with these kinds of things and these kind of topics, gamification is just 100%. I say this because I love gamification, but 100% is the best way to go. People learn by doing things. You can put a book in front of them a million times and they can read the book and they can do a couple of the exercises. But when you put them into a gaming environment where they are task oriented or, sort of role oriented and they're earning points and they're earning badges, yeah. More importantly, when they're competing against each other, yeah. And these kind of elements just drive that immersion factor, and it's really kind of exciting.
What are the focuses of the gamification that you focus on? Did you mention it was security awareness? Or
so in my former position, it was specifically to train red teams, blue teams, SOCs, so more on the technical side. Now with Shifted, what I'm doing is definitely security awareness and more probably traditional gaming. Something that has really bothered me and I've struggled with over the last couple of years is we tend to try to solution a human being out of the problem when it comes to security awareness and human firewall and things of that nature. We tend to assume that human beings are dumb and they're never going to figure it out. They're always going to click on the links. But I don't believe that that's true. And we don't really think that that's true either. When you get people involved in a way that they enjoy and that they, actually start to understand, then human beings become the best firewall that we could ever really have. But we have to get them to the point where they enjoy it. So what we're focusing on now is a super fun game where you can be a hacker and you have to protect your stuff and you get cool guy toys. And we did a POC not too long ago, actually with Microsoft. And one of my favorite comments from this POC was, I finally understand what a botnet is.
Oh, yeah.
And it just took that piece, that gamification, that immersion, and kind of learning through that.
Nice. So we got a question here. Someone was asking, what words of encouragement or guidance can you give to those just starting in the career, especially given the depth and breadth is so large? Do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest piece of encouragement or advice that I can give is be hungry for learning, be hungry for education. Get your hands on every piece of material you can, because the field, as everybody here knows, it changes rapidly. Techniques change rapidly. Technology changes rapidly. And what folks are doing in terms of, attack vectors and threat actors, what they're doing changes constantly. So whether you're just beginning or whether you're a long-time person, you really need to jump in head first and really get your hands on everything you can. My second piece to that is super overwhelming. That is literally jumping into the middle of the ocean and trying to figure out, what you should read, what you shouldn't read. One of the biggest things you're going to have to figure out in that is what you like and what you don't like. So start with the 101s, start with the basics for every topic that you think is kind of in your realm of reality, and start there. And if it's not, giving you a warm fuzzy, okay, next. Don't go 2 miles deep in technical knowledge and figure out that that's really not your jam. Lee?
Yeah, I concur with that. I think there are, I come at this from a perspective of, application security and operational security. The one thing that's just incredible about the security industry is how open things are for sharing, and the fact everybody here is here voluntarily just because they're looking to learn some more. There are a couple basic things that I think are important to pay attention to. So, for example, being aware and pretty deeply aware of the OWASP top 10 for things. So knowing what cross-site scripting is and SQL injection, those are some of the table stakes. The one thing I will say is that folks that I've seen that have come to Microsoft with a master's of cybersecurity, today, most people that are in the security industry came from non-traditional backgrounds. They followed their interests. They followed the things that kind of tweaked to their brain the best. And once you I went to U of T, there was zero security in my program for software engineering. Now, pretty much, most universities and schools have some degree of security at least. But realizing that you can come in by following your own interests and still be successful. A great resource that I think is helpful to understand some of the breadth in the industry is Leslie Carhart has her TIS phone blog, and she's got a Getting Into Cybersecurity Mega Thread or something like that. And I just really love that it does go and talk about some of the major areas. And then as an approach, it's what I do personally is, as a thing interests me, dig into it. You can become an expert in the latest malware outbreak, an expert in all of malware ever. And as you poke around in the things that interest you, you become just more and more well-rounded. Maybe at some point you just really gel into crypto or phishing or things like that, and you're going to start to specialize and become more effective there.
I see a question here about risks on IT to client communication, tech support asking people to click a link, and et cetera. So kind of dovetailing on another idea here, Gartner just put out their latest security awareness report, and it's kind of talking about how phishing has been the focus of everything because it's such a big problem. And it goes back to the clicking on the links, right? What's going to happen when you click on the link? But the way that people have been approaching it for the last several years doesn't really allow them to understand the ramifications of clicking on that link in a way that is personal to them. Okay, so you can slap people on the wrist and say, don't click any links ever because you never know what it might be. But that's just not reality, right? That's not what users, what human beings do. So I think you really have to get at the heart of how human beings act from a social perspective, from a psychological perspective, and that's where doing more of the positive reinforcement is really important. But I think the bigger piece of that is that phishing is not the only problem. And you can't tell somebody or spend so much time on one particular topic in cybersecurity without letting them know everything else and all of the reasons that they go together. I tend to believe that human beings are generally much smarter than we give them credit for. When you start talking about concepts like a botnet or malware or ransomware and really giving enough high-level information that they understand the damages that it does, that they understand what their role in activating or not activating it is, that they become much more aware of what's going on. So I think it's kind of a shift mentally of how we're doing this and how we're getting people to understand what security actually means. And really, I say this all the time now, get the human beings back in the game, right? We spent so long pushing them off and saying, we know you're never going to do it right, but we can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and I think also when you can get people and the kind of awareness training that you do, I think we're never going to get it to a point of every mail says, hey, log on to the corporate portal and then navigate through this and this and this and then go here. I think there's enough complicated websites out there that clicking on a link is usually going to be required at some point. Making sure that users are aware of the kind of risks that can happen, it's a really big thing. And being aware of clicking on a link and being asked for a password. There's a couple things after clicking the link that I think become really, really important. And one thing that I've been surprised by, so over the past years, Microsoft has really been rolling out using 2FA for everything, to the point that, when you're logged on, you log onto your machine with your password, but then from then on, every website that you visit that requires authentication in the Microsoft domain, that's all using Windows Hello and 2FA and all that kind of stuff. And some people might argue like, that's great, you're Microsoft, you can do those kind of things, and that's a hard pull, but we've done it. And the one thing that's been shocking to me is how effective that has been at the mental aspect of phishing. Because in the past, you wouldn't know if you had half of your sites sometimes asking for your corporate credentials and sometimes not, then you might just be more like, oh, that's just the site, it's broken, I'm going to enter them. We're far enough now that when a site asks for it, I've seen this so many times in a screen share with somebody or whatever, where they click on a thing and it asks for the credentials and they go, hold on, that never happens. I'm never asked to enter my credential at work. And once you're at that point, and as you can start to reduce the number of credentials that are being asked for, phishing just flops, because whenever it does happen, then everybody is much, much more cautious about it. And so, I think we're going to start to see less around punishing people for clicking on the links and more around what can they do to protect themselves afterwards.
So Lee, I see a good one here for both of us, but I'm going to kick it to you first. The two of you are certainly developed security professionals and have an admirable career trajectories. B-Sides appears to have a great mix of novice and experienced security folks. What mistakes have you made in your security career, and what advice would you provide that would be helpful to both the new and the gray-haired?
Well, neither of us have gray hair. We're hiding it well. This is good. Okay, so I'll do both. Advice for the new person and advice for the grizzled. So advice for new people who are interested in security. The advice I would give is to do the deep dive. It's really, really common for folks that are new to the industry to, read all the blogs and check all the Twitters, hear about the newest attacks, and talk about them and treat that as their kind of center of expertise. Is like, oh, did you hear about the latest attack of whatever? Or, hey, did you hear that this CVE just recently compromised this thing? One of the things that I think really separates people early in the career from like really junior in their career to the folks becoming more advanced in their career is to be able to read through, let's say, an article or take a look at an exploit and form your own opinions. A great example, and I'll defend Linux here, was there was a bug recently in Linux with the sudo command where if you said like sudo -1, badness would happen and you'd get root. That was widely kind of lambasted of, hey, Linux is so bad at security that this and this happens. And the same thing happens. People will point that same gun at Microsoft, more frequently at Microsoft for sure. When you dug into that, what you realize is that this was an incredibly esoteric configuration that you had to have very, very specific things in this config, and then only in that situation would it actually pop. And so by digging deep into that, then you get the chance to form your own opinion of risk. And because if you're just taking your opinion of risk from what others are saying, then you're going to be always running after like Spectre and Meltdown and Heartbleed and all that kind of stuff, and you'll be ignoring the things that are important risks to your organization. And when I think about advice for the grizzled folks, and when I think about grizzled folks advice there, I think about the ones that are grizzled and they're still effective. And it really harkens back to what you say is like keeping your ear to the ground, keeping your eyes open. There are folks who, I've engaged with that previously were amazing at security, and then they started to distance themselves from reality, or they're just listening less to the real stuff, and they start to think about security by proxy, and they won't be able to, if you're asking about something when it comes to risk, they can't go down that path of understanding the depth. And at that point, it's really easy to get misled by the media or somebody who's got an opinion and is trying to persuade you otherwise. And so, yeah, for your whole career, it is painful to dig into the deep things, but by being able to do that, it helps you both early career and late career. Keenan, what about you?
Oh, I'd have the same one for both. And it's super, super important. And for a lot of reasons, especially with the gray-haired folks, exactly what you just said. And my response is community. Find your people, find your security people, read the blogs, join the groups, go to the B-sides meetings, get on Discord and hop on a couple of security servers and, find people who are thought leaders in the space and hear what they have to say and communicate with those people. The great thing about InfoSec in general, and I love this, is that pretty much everybody is approachable, right? You can send an email to somebody or a text or a Discord message or a Twitter message and say, hey, I found this thing and I was really confused by it and you seem to really know what you're talking about, can we talk? And 9 times out of 10, they're gonna say, yeah, sure, because that's cool and they wanna help. So I think that, not relying entirely on the community is important, kind of like Lee said, you have to find your own space in it. But I think that having the community and being able to interact with it is absolutely crucial to figuring out what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. And it's also absolutely crucial for those older folks to figure out, what new stuff is coming in, what kind of new technologies are out there, so they don't start to distance themselves from that security reality. So I'm gonna hit back on community every time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number, when I think about Twitter, for example, right? Like it's one of these things where that's pretty much the watering hole for information security. And the one thing, I've learned as I've grown, when I first started getting into Twitter, it was like, oh, this person's like InfoSec famous and like follow them. And then eventually you're like, you know what? They're a jerk. I'm going to ignore what they say. Maybe they did something cool a couple of years ago, but they're a jerk. And then there's other people who are like, I just really enjoy engaging with them. They have good ideas, do cool things, and then they have 4 followers. So, it's absolutely not a follower count thing. Anyone who puts stock in the number of followers they have is just primarily putting stock in how many bots that they have. So, but yeah, the ability to interact with folks that you respect with is super awesome. Have you had any, Keenan, have you had any cool engagements on Twitter or community that kind of surprised you?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. One of my heroes in my life, Ann Johnson from Microsoft, actually. I happened to be in an event with her, and I responded to something on Twitter, and she responded back, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, my hero just responded back to me. And we've been able to, continue that communication and have moments where I ask questions about business, about cybersecurity business, and about security in general. And it's great to have somebody like that just be willing to, talk to you openly about those kinds of things on Twitter.
Yeah.
How about you?
There's a couple of folks. One that I like is I started chatting with somebody, and we both realized that that we liked random hobbies, and we liked doing stuff with our hands and stuff like that. And so we were getting ready to go to DerbyCon one year, and we're like, hey, let's do a hobby swap. because people don't recognize how much time goes into hobbies.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
my wife has to deal with this for knitting, where someone's like, oh, would you mind knitting my family hats? And it's just like, you're asking for 500 hours of work here. So our idea with this hobby swap is we both respect the amount of work that goes into a hobby, and you would never want to like pay a friend for their hobby, because no money is worth time when you're in the infosec industry. But we can swap hobby stuff. And so I ended up doing some rock carving. He had his house, he calls it Stonehaven, so I chiseled this like Stonehaven thing in a nice font for him, and he does woodwork, and so he made my wife a shawl pin, like kind of a wooden loop with a stick that goes through it to keep a shawl in the right place. And you can just you can bond over security, and you can bond over random hobbies too. So that's super
I have
cool.
to throw in a gaming reference here. I cannot tell you how many InfoSec people are my friends on Xbox. Like, we are just, it's a whole other community of things. And like, committing to friends over gaming is like next level. Just do it.
Yeah. Oh, there was a question before. So, Keenan, what's your own process to stay relevant in the field?
Oh, goodness. Kind of the same thing we've been talking about this whole time, right? Is never stop learning. Never get to the point where you think that you know everything, because you don't. Hands down, you don't. There was a time when I won some award for artificial intelligence or whatever, and I look back at that now and I'm like, gosh, I haven't even picked up anything that touches AI in years.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I better go do that, because somebody's going to ask me a question about that eventually, and I'm going to be like, well, I don't know what's happened in the last couple of years. So
Mm-hmm.
it's 100% stay in it, keep learning. If you started down the path and you love it, then keep learning about it. Don't let it go past you.
Mm-hmm. One thing we do at work on my team is we have a series that we've set up, just a regular meeting series. It's 2 hours every Tuesday, and that is safe space for us to concentrate on learning new things. And anytime you're doing security, you're like, oh, I really wish I knew more about buffer overflows or machine learning security or things like that. And that stuff can feel like it adds up, and I don't think it's right for people to only be able to upskill themselves like on their own time and their home time and whatever else. And so on our team, we have this thing where when we were together, we would do this together. Like, it was a conference room that I booked, and you would all you sit there and learn about whatever you want to learn about. The ground rules are that like Outlook is closed and the web is closed unless it's related to what you're trying to learn about. And if somebody is like, oh, I'm just too busy, I'm going to be on email the whole time, then like, just don't come. And by doing this together as a team, we recognize that we're never going to stop learning, and that we can learn together, and we end up getting positive reinforcement there, where everybody is learning together, and we have a little chat at the end about what were you working on and what was interesting to you. I did the under the wire, some of the under the wire CTFs a while back. I thought that was a lot of fun. Mess around with breaking Python's hash code algorithm for a while. That was fun. Like, just always be learning for sure.
I want to tag on to that, because you brought up something that reminded me of the whole concept, right? Before COVID, for us, it was all about going to a place and hanging out with everybody and learning together and the social kind of aspect of it. But I feel like what we've done to respond to that is amazing. There are so many cons. There are pancake cons, and there are corn cons, and there are Grim, and there are all of these other things that you can get into and really learn and get into CTFs and do things with some of the best people in the field, and newbies too, people at all levels. So I think this opportunity has really expanded for us to be able to learn from so many more people than we did with our original con concept.
Yeah. And also seeing how things have adapted. When COVID first started, there was kind of a feeling like cons were going to become just live YouTubes.
Yep.
And this is where it's amazing to be able to have a situation like this where, you know, folks that are participating are absolutely participating. And it's not just, you know, watching something that's pre-recorded, but the people are there, right? So I've been really enjoying seeing how that works. I think we're still, like, as an industry, trying to find our legs on how to make sure that that they're engaging. You know, I think it's easier when you're in a virtual conference to like have the window to the side as you're on email or whatever. And, you know, it's kind of doing yourself a disservice if you're not paying attention. You'll think you are, and then you realize that you don't remember any facts from the whole thing. So it's a skill like anything else.
Okay, we've had a couple more come up here. The industry, I'll shoot this over to Lee. The industry is constantly changing and there's always new cool things to dive into. How do you both keep a separation of work from personal time and prevent them to bleeding into each other? That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, my secret is to make sure my wife is interested in computer security, so I can talk about it whenever I want. No, I think my personal approach is that there's just so much that's interesting, that when you realize that you're never going to learn it all, at this point you just realize it's all about, you know, picking and choosing. You know, I feel like I do a pretty good job on making sure that my work, I'm effective at work, and at home I'm present with my family. You know, I'll for sure, you know, read stuff happening on Twitter and be interested in stuff, but, you know, being able to separate those where you know that like you're never going to learn everything that's interesting, and at some point, you know, families are interesting too, and being around your friends is interesting too. Being around your gamer friends is interesting too. And, you know, for me, it's doubly so because I'm just like a fanatical hobbyist. Like I mentioned before, I just love doing hobbies, and you know, you run into the same thing. Like you can never learn as much as you want about blacksmithing and welding and woodwork and stuff. And so, yeah, just saying, you know what, this is good for today, and, you know, pick up what interests you the next day too. What about you?
This is so hard for me. This is so hard because I'm single and I'm the CEO of a company and it's just me and my dog. So I am a workaholic. I have no problem sitting down at like 7 o'clock at night and then working all the way to 2 o'clock in the morning and then like going to sleep for an hour and then coming back and working the whole time. And then when COVID happened, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to become the most ginormous person in the world because I also love to bake. And I'm like, okay, I really have to start organizing my time better. So I think like half of the country when COVID hit, I bought a Peloton. And I force myself to do a certain amount of time a day. And I force myself to walk away from my desk at least a certain number of times a day. And I force myself to go play Call of Duty at least sometime during the day because
for you.
it's so important. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge for, you know, we talked a lot about burnout, you know, throughout the last couple of days, and it's huge for that. You can't, similar to what you said, you can't do everything. You can't learn it all. You can't fix all the problems today. They're still going to be there tomorrow. So I also, you know, reach back into my military background and think to myself, you know, is anybody going to die if I don't do this today? And the answer is almost always no. And I'm like, okay, then I don't need to be sitting here doing this.
Yeah. Sometimes for you that was, nope, yes, they will die if I don't do this today.
Right.
So well, you know, the baking, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, the baking thing you mentioned is like perfect because like we can feel like we can read all the books, we can feel that we buy, we can feel like we can be as updated as we want on security. But baking is a perfect one because like, you know, you can't eat all the cookies and eat all the cake and all the pie. And like where, you know, when you're working from home, you can't even like schlep it off to, you know, your coworkers like, hey, look at, I'm coming in with a couple dozen cookies. So
So this
yeah.
was actually a real problem for me when I started making cakes, and I really loved to make mirror glaze cakes, like really
Oh,
complicated cakes. And I started doing it only when I was stressed out from work. And I was
mhm.
making so many cakes. I had like a cake every week, and I'm trying to give them away. And here, please take this. And here's this holiday cake. And then I realized that I was doing it because I was stressed out from work. And I had to analyze that and say, I can't turn my hobby into stress relief, because then it's kind of it's taking away from the fact that it's a calming hobby for me. It's a calming thing to do, relaxing, rather
Yeah.
than a response to I spent 24 hours at my computer and, and now I have
Yeah.
to like do something. So
Yeah.
I would say definitely be careful with your hobbies, that they don't become overshadowed by stress or by burnout.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it sounds like you turned into somebody with a squash patch, but but out of it was coming fondant and cakes and all that.
Absolutely.
So a question from Brett: do you think that for a lot of non-technical people, they generally feel that risk is abstracted from them, so I guess they're not actually impacted by it, that other people are doing it on their behalf? So how do you think non-technical people, we can help them um, change behaviorally?
I 100% think that end users are totally abstracted from security. And there's two reasons for that. One of them is that the way that we've been teaching about security is not personalized, it's not humanized at all. It's all talking about the network and this, and there's nothing personal about it. But there's also a conflicting problem, and that is that cybersecurity breaches, the loss of their data, the loss of their information, most people are getting to the point where they're overloaded with that, and they're like, why does it matter anymore? Why do I care? So we have to really drill into that personalized piece, that humanistic piece that drives people to say, wait a minute, this is important. And that's something we've been really striving to do with our product at Shifted is, make sure that when you're taking info from somebody, information, when you're trying to get their data, that it's personal data, it's their driver's license, it's their credit card number, it's this, and then helping them to understand how that leads to other issues within the network. And quite frankly, since COVID, with everybody working from home, it's more important than ever that they feel the personal impact of what it is that's happening, because they are the ones that are now transmitting all of this information from home while their kids are on their Xbox or on Twitch. And they're, oh my gosh, I have this great story. I was on a security and IoT panel at the beginning of like March, sort of April timeframe, and everybody was talking about securing all of these devices at home. And one of the panelists actually was on, and he had everything going on in the background, and there was a TV in the background, and his kid was playing. And he entered the Wi-Fi password in while he was giving his talk. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that people need to be thinking about. And we're not getting that information to them in a way that's real or personal enough for them to care. So I absolutely think that that's true.
What are your thoughts around, like, I feel like there's maybe almost two aspects to the question. So one are end users at their workstations who are becoming a risk to the company, maybe by being phished and whatever. And then there's another aspect, which is just regular folks on their phones, and then there's a perspective of personal security, like their bank accounts and things like that. What are your thoughts about how we help people understand the risk when it's their personal lives?
I think it's absolutely critical that, and this is going to make a lot of people angry, but I think it's absolutely critical that everything is personal. All of that is personal. Because if you think about it from a work perspective, if you click on a link or you do this, it could be your job on the line. It could be your company that gets attacked and all of your data, and then the company gets sued, and then the company goes under or they don't go under. And there are personal effects to everything that happens in cybersecurity, whether it's the personal effects that will be felt by you if you do something in your work environment and you click on ransomware, and or you work at a hospital and suddenly you're locked down and patients can't get care, or if it's the effects that will happen to you financially, or for your home, or for your safety, or for the photos that you have on your phone that are now all over the internet. I think it has to be personal, because it is. All of these things are personal.
I wonder if we're going to see ever a form of ransomware that goes against people. Right now, it's really common against companies, but ransoming people on their, what's on their private photos and stuff. That's scary, but I don't see it as a place that these people won't go.
Absolutely. And I think, and this was a big part of the IoT push. The more that we see all of these devices being connected in your refrigerator and your robot vacuum and all of the computers that you have set up if you're in information security, there's a lot more risk being added to that. And if somebody, comes in and locks down your entire network and all of your things stop working, that's a personal issue. That's a problem. And I think we will see more of that in the future.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I feel like ransomware, as we kind of know it, started personally. Like you would hear about people saying like they'd be getting their computers hacked, and then people would go on to the Facebook and let people know and kind of do the release there, unless the ransom was paid. But I feel like maybe it's just the media and reporting, but I feel like that's tailed off compared to the focus on corporate ransomware. And I wonder if that's because they're being paid more often from corporate.
I was going to actually say, that's an excellent point. And I think that threat actors and cyber criminals typically go for the path of least resistance, right? That's why phishing is so popular right now, because so many end users don't understand, ransomware. They don't understand botnets. They don't understand these other things. They're vulnerable to that kind of attack, which goes back to teach everybody everything. I want to teach the world.
Yeah. So we're just about out of time. What's a question that you were hoping somebody asked and you want a chance to answer anyways?
I got to think about that for a second. If you have one, go, so I can think about it.
Okay. Let's see here. So I'll ask myself a question. What is a thing that I can do as somebody in a company to improve the security of our applications and infrastructure? So this is what I primarily do at Microsoft. And one of the things that I found has been helpful has been security is often considered as a block, where like you got to ask and go through security and then they block your release or they do this, whatever. We've been shifting to an approach of just reaching out to teams as soon as possible. I have a regular series of meetings that we run that we call them like security architecture discussions, and they're happening all the time. And teams that are like, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Can we have a chat early? And when you can get to folks early and show that you care about them and participate in their solution and work with them, I've just seen a lot of success to that.
That's a good one. I'm going to fall back on one of my super favorites, and that is the culture question. I've worked with a lot of teams, whether it's SOCs or red teams or, the whole gamut. And what I hear from pretty much everybody is our culture doesn't really allow us to do this, or doesn't really allow us to get training, or doesn't really allow us to go to these events. And what I say to all of those people is that you are the culture. You are your company culture.
Yep.
Tell everybody, talk to everybody, ask everybody, don't be afraid to discuss the fact that your culture isn't conducive for most of the people on your team. And here's why. And here's what we would like to do to fix that. Being able to reach out to your leadership, to your executive team and say, the culture here is not working for us from a security perspective or any other perspective, really. And here's why, and here's what we'd like to do about it. Just taking those little steps, the ground movement is huge, because if nobody talks about the culture and nobody says the culture sucks here, then the culture is just going to keep sucking. So everybody needs to remember that you are the culture. So fix it.
Yeah, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Change, absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. That is our time. Those are great closing thoughts. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This was a lot of fun. And thank you,
Absolutely.
Keenan. It was
Thank
nice
you.
talking.
I'm super curious to hear about the rock carving thing, so I'm gonna have to ask you about that later.
Awesome. See you later, folks.
All right, thanks, guys.